What's up? This is Joe with McCpicks, here to break down UFC 283, Glover Teixeira taking on Jamal Hill. This event takes place in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, so naturally we have a lot of Brazilian fighters on this card. If everything stays intact, we have a solid number of fights, currently 15 scheduled bouts. So for this video, I'm going to somewhat switch up the layout, going to bring up some pros and cons for each fighter, and then kind of summarize my prediction. But before we get into it, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you like the content. We have a lot to talk about, so let's dig right in. The first matchup is Simon Oliveira taking on Daniel Marcos. Oliveira is the favorite, sitting about minus 195. Marcos is the underdog at plus 165. So Oliveira is a well-rounded fighter. He has a Muay Thai base, but can definitely mix in the wrestling and jiu-jitsu. He has solid cardio from what I've seen. He's a pressure fighter. He's aggressive. He has an 89% finish rate, so he's hunting for the finish throughout the fight. He's durable, but he has awful takedown defense, and we saw that in his previous matchup. But this probably won't factor in this fight because he's taking on Marcos, who's mostly a boxing, striking type. But Oliveira could be a little bit reckless at times and leave himself open for counters. And he doesn't have the best wrestling. He tends to telegraph his takedown attempts. Daniel Marcos, on the other hand, is a solid striker. He has really sharp, quick hands. He stays composed in the pocket, doesn't really force exchanges, which is good. But he doesn't really have that killer instinct. If you watch his Contender Series fight, he had his opponent on one leg earlier on in the fight, and he still was unable to get the finish. He looks to have good takedown defense, but his ground game overall is a question mark. And so is his cardio. His cardio seems to slow down in fights. And like I said earlier, Marcos is more of a boxing, striking type, which is solid, but he's kind of one-dimensional. He has 0 submissions on his record, so predominant striker. In summary, I like Oliveira here because he just has more ways to win the fight. Grappling upside, relentless pace, cardio, and more of a finishing upside. However, I could see a world where Oliveira struggles to get this fight down to the mat, and Marcos lands the cleaner, more refined strikes on the feet. Overall, on the money line perspective, it's going to be a pass for me. If I were to play this fight, I think I would attack it through props. I like Oliveira via submission, or if you want to play it safe, inside the distance, since Marcos' his ground game is a question mark, and he seems to slow down in fights, and Oliveira tends to be submission over position. So prediction for me is going to be Oliveira via submission. Next matchup, we have Josiane Nunes taking on Zarah Fairn. Nunes is the favorite, decent sized favorite, currently sitting at minus 380, and Fairn is plus 310. So Nunes has big power. She's a finisher, especially for the weight class, 78% finish rate, all by knockout. She has good striking. She's durable. And I believe she has only one loss on her record, which came to Taila Santos. No shame in that. She almost beat the champ, arguably beat the champ. But Nunes is very, very small for the weight class, and she's also one-dimensional. We haven't really seen too much of a ground game from her. Zarah Fairn, on the other hand, is huge for the division. SureDog has her listed at 5'10". She's a pretty good kickboxer, but that's about all she has going for her, honestly. She has 0 ground game. She's super stiff and rigid on the feet. Doesn't really move her head off the center line, which could definitely be an issue here. And also, she's 36 years old, so that's a concern. She's not very, very active overall in terms of fighting often. So, in summary, I think Nunes is definitely the better fighter, but I think the line's a little wide. It's tough to bet on a fighter at that price with such a size discrepancy, especially in women's MMA. In regards to betting, taking a look at Nunes via KO is the obvious choice. Overall, for me, I think it's going to be a pass. Fairn was finished in her previous 2 fights. Take a look at who she was facing: Megan Anderson and Felicia Spencer, 2 really big featherweights. And the main thing, though, is that Fairn was finished on the ground, and Nunes isn't much of a grappler. So I do think that Nunez finds a finish at some point because she hits hard and because of how stiff and rigid Farron is on the feet. But the price, I'm thinking the price for Nunez KO probably won't be worth it. But the prediction's going to be Nunez by KO. Next, we have Nicholas Dalby taking on Worley Alves, and actually some interesting line movement on this fight. Dalby is the favorite, currently sitting at, let's see here, minus 125 on DraftKings, but he opened, I'll go with that minus 110, but money immediately came in on him. He actually went down to minus 175, but now he's back up to minus 125, Worley Alves plus 105. So Dalby is overall well-rounded. He's got a karate style, so he's a predominant striker. His solid cardio, durable fighter. He's actually only finished one time by submission against Ronson. Not the best look, but Ronson, I believe, popped for some sort of PED, so that fight was turned to a no contest. Although if you look at his record, especially on UFC stats, he has been knocked down in a number of fights, but he seems to have good recoverability, which is good. He is 38 years old, so the age is a concern, but his cardio did look good in his last fight, and he doesn't have the best finish rate. I don't think he's gotten one finish in the UFC, but he's fought some pretty durable guys. Worley Alves, on the other hand, is a well-rounded fighter as well. A lot more dangerous than Dalby. He has heavy hands, strong kicks, pretty solid submission threat. Starts fast, puts on some good pressure, but the durability is a concern for him, as well as the cardio. He seems to be overwhelmed at times and can get finished. In summary, I'm actually going to pick Dalby, even though I see a lot of money coming in on Alves. I think Dalby's just a more durable fighter with solid cardio who can sustain his game plan across 3 rounds. With Alves, you kind of just never know what you're going to get. He's just a volatile fighter. He can look amazing at one fight and then look terrible in the next, like in his most recent fight against Wells. Alves seems to be good at being the hammer and being bad at being the nail, whereas some fighters can take a beating and come back. It just kind of seems that Alves wilts until he gives up if he's being overwhelmed or if he's losing. And I actually think that even though Dalby has not gotten a finish in the UFC, I think Dalby maybe like a round 3 prop is worth a stab at, a little poke for a small amount of a unit. So the prediction is going to be Dalby via round 3 knockout. And I could see it being not like a clean knockout, but more so Alves being fatigued and Dalby just kind of maybe even ground and pound until the ref kind of steps in. Okay, next it's going to be a banger because Terrence McKinney's in the fight. So it's Terrence McKinney taking on Ismail Bonfim. And the line is McKinney is sitting at between minus 110 and minus 120. He opened the round minus 130, and money was coming in on Bonfim, but it seems like some recent money back on McKinney, and Bonfim is sitting at plus 100. So McKinney is the definition of a kill or be killed fighter, and he's usually the one doing the killing. He's dangerous everywhere, has 100% finish rate, and he's also been finished in all 4 of his losses. He has insane power and accuracy with his striking, and he's also a big submission threat on the mat. If you haven't seen his fight against Drew Dober, I recommend go and watch it. It's wild. Drew Dober has been in the UFC forever. He's fought some killers, and he's never been knocked down until he fought McKinney, and McKinney had him hurt on multiple occasions. And then McKinney gassed and got finished himself. So McKinney has a kiss of death in his hands, but it comes with a cost, right? He slows down tremendously. So the cardio is just not there, and that's a concern for sure. Ismail Bonfim, on the other hand, he looks solid. He's a well-rounded prospect. Technical striking, seems to be competent on the mat as well. Decent experience on the regional scene. He looked really good in his Contender Series debut against a pretty highly touted prospect. But he's been submitted 3 times, which is all of his losses. But if you take a look at it, that was early on in his career, and it was against solid fighters. But the level of competition's overall just not there. and he's just not as impressive as McKinney. So in summary, I think that Terrence finishes Bonfim inside of a round. McKinney's just too powerful, aggressive, and accurate with his striking. He's also the bigger man in this matchup, and I think he's just going to take it to Bonfim in the first. So I think actually the safest way to attack this fight would be the under 1.5 rounds, or if you really like McKinney, I would take him inside the distance if you feel more confident in doing that. Um, because we've seen, you know, I would take the under because we've seen McKinney gas and get finished on multiple occasions. So the prediction is going to be McKinney round one, either knockout or sub, or however he wants it. Next up, we have Cody Stamann taking on Luan Lacerda. This one's going to be a quick breakdown, but talking about Stamann, he's a solid wrestler. He has good cardio, striking is serviceable, solid UFC experience, but he's not much of a finisher. He has a 45% finish rate. And then moving on to Luan Lacerda, he seems to be like a jiu-jitsu ace. He has 10 of his 12 wins via submission. But he's making his UFC debut, and the level of competition is just not there for the most part. Just not a lot of tape on this guy. So, in summary, I think that Stamann is going to take this one by decision. Not a ton of confidence in this one because I was barely able to find anything on Lacerda. But I do favor the experience and wrestling overall for Stamann, and I tend to favor wrestling over pure jiu-jitsu. So if you like Lacerda, you might want to take him via submission since Stamann has been subbed twice, but take a look who he was subbed against, Said Nurmagomedov and Aljo Sterling. Overall, it's likely a pass, and I did not talk about the line here. I know Stamann's a pretty sizable favorite. He is, let's see, minus 320. Lacerda's plus 265. So prediction for me is going to be Stamann via decision. Next matchup, we have Mounir LAZZEZ taking on Gabriel Bonfim, the brother of Ismail Bonfim. And the line currently is Mounir LAZZEZ is a plus 155 dog, and Gabriel Bonfim is minus 180. So talking about LAZZEZ first, he's big for the division with a really long reach, solid striking, mixes it up a lot on the feet in terms of his, strike selection, elbows, punches, knees, kicks as well. He also mixes up his target as well, goes to the body, legs, and head. He's a durable fighter. He's finished one time in his career against Warlley Alves when Warlley was just hammering the body, and then LAZZEZ kind of just crumbled. LAZZEZ is powerful overall. He's finished 7 of his 11 wins. I believe they were all by knockout. He has really good cardio. Even his last fight, he was fresh in the 3rd round, which was a high volume fight. But the age is a concern. 35 years old. He got to the UFC late. And his grappling and submission defense is somewhat of a question mark. Gabriel Bonfim, on the other hand, is undefeated. He's making his UFC debut. Well-rounded fighter. 100% finish rate. 77% by submission. He looks to be aggressive. Puts on a lot of pressure to his opponents. Overall, he looks like a really solid prospect. But like with most fighters making their UFC debut, level of competition is a question mark, and he's hittable. He leaves a lot of openings with his chin up in the air. So, in summary, I'm actually going to take the underdog here in LAZZEZ. If he keep this fight on the feet, utilize that reach advantage, and mix up his striking attack like he typically does, I can see him getting the nod. The concern here is Bonfim getting the fight down to the mat and locking up submission, right? So far, LAZZEZ has shown decent takedown defense. He actually fought a solid fighter and grappler in Eldorov at the Brave CF organization and was able to get back to his feet after getting, taken down multiple times, and he avoided the submission. Actually went 5 rounds, I think. And it's always not a bad idea to fade the Contender Series fighter making their UFC debut at underdog money. So the prediction for this one is going to be LAZZEZ via decision. Next one is going to be very quick. We have Jailton Almeida taking on Shamil Abdurakhimov. Almeida is a massive favorite, rightfully so, currently sitting around minus 900. Shamil is plus 625. So Overall, this fight, I'm going to be staying away. The line is already out of control. Even on the under 1.5 rounds is completely juiced. You know, quick one, Almeida should take him down, either pound him out or submit him. So prediction for me on this one is going to be Almeida by submission. Next we have Thiago Moises taking on, I'm going to call this guy M. Costa because I have no idea how to pronounce his first name. And do we have a line out on this one? I don't believe we do. I'm assuming Moises is going to be a sizable favorite, probably at least a 3-1 favorite, because of just the level of UFC experience he has and Costa making his debut on short notice. But anyway, talking about Thiago, he's a well-rounded fighter. He's a jiu-jitsu ace. That's pretty much his bread and butter. He has solid striking overall, was able to out-kickbox Alex Hernandez over 3 rounds. Good cardio. He's a durable fighter historically, if you take a look at his record, but he was beat up pretty bad by Joel Alvarez, although he wasn't really knocked out cold or anything, but was just kind of overwhelmed with some damaging strikes and essentially just got beat up. But he's actually young. He's only 27, which I thought he was older, but he has some solid UFC experience already. The main concern with Moises is he could be low volume at times, but besides that, he's pretty solid. Getting into Costa, he's a short notice replacement, but he's Brazilian, so I'm assuming he's already in Brazil. Not too much tape on this guy. He seems decent, well-rounded, but I just think this is too much too soon for him. I've seen him taken down on the regional scene by low-level fighters, and one of the fights I saw, he got choked out. He looked like he was unconscious for over a minute. I'm not sure what the ref was doing there. It was actually a pretty scary scene, but he doesn't seem to be too impressive overall. So, like I said, I think this is too much too soon for a guy like Costa. He's taken on a low level competition on the regional scene, and is now making his UFC debut on short notice against a solid fighter in Moises. Costa seems to implement wrestling, but he leaves his neck vulnerable at times, which I noticed. So I think that Moises will eventually cinch up some sort of either defensive submission, or even shoot a takedown of his own and look for the finish. So the prediction for me is going to be Moises via submission, and depending on what they release the line at, I'll probably play that as a bet. Next matchup, we have Gregory Rodrigues taking on Bruno Ferreira, Bruno the Hulk, I'll call him. And the line is for this, let's see, Rodrigues is a sizable favorite, minus 325. Bruno the Hulk, plus 270. So talking about Rodrigues, I mean, this guy is just a tank. Not exactly sure how he makes middleweight. Looks around, at least light heavyweight to heavyweight 225 in the octagon. He's a dangerous fighter with an 85% finish rate, mostly by knockout. I don't think he has a submission in the UFC yet, but he's definitely no slouch on the ground. He's well-rounded, pretty much does everything well. But my main concern here is, or my main concern with Rodrigues in general, is his durability. So he's definitely a tough guy. We've seen him hurt and wobbled on multiple occasions, and he seems to be able to recover. For example, Chidi Njokuani had him hurt and cut very bad in his last fight. So did Junyoung Park, had him hurt and wobbled, and he was knocked out by Jordan Williams on the Contender Series. So durability is definitely a concern for Rodrigues, but he's definitely tough as they come. And against both Njokuani and Jung, he ended up getting hurt and coming back and winning, knocking them out in the second round. And then talking about Bruno the Hulk, he's undefeated, making his UFC debut, 100% finish rate, and the furthest we've seen him in a fight is the 1 minute into the second round. Again, fighting on the regional scene, so naturally the level of competition is not there, but he's actually looked pretty decent. He's light on his feet, he's dynamic in the octagon, switches stances a lot, and he obviously has big power with the 100% finish rate. And he seems to mix it up a lot. He can wrestle and work some of his Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But I've seen him get reversed while in dominant positions on the mat, which is a concern, and his cardio is a major unknown. So, in summary, you have to favor Rodrigues given the level of UFC experience. He's had a full training camp of this fight. He's a bigger fighter, and he's just a more proven commodity here. We have seen him win in decisions at the highest level, so that's good for Rodrigues. But personally, I don't think he's a parlay piece as such a big favorite. This guy, Bruno the Hulk, hits hard, like I mentioned earlier, and we've seen Rodriguez wobbled on multiple occasions. So if you like Bruno, then maybe take him via knockout. That'll probably be the best look. I don't think there's any totals out in this fight yet. I'm assuming it's going to be set at 1.5, given the finishing rate for both these fighters. But I actually could see this getting extended a bit since Bruno, they both don't like apply a crazy amount of pressure, and we're not sure about Bruno's durability. So, but at the end of the day, the prediction is going to be Rodriguez via knockout. Next, we have the legend Shogun Rua taking on Ihor Potieria. Shogun is the underdog, currently sitting at plus 170. Ihor is minus 200. So I'm going to get right to it on this one. I like the legend in Shogun here, and I actually already have a bet on him on FanDuel. I got him at plus 184 on the money line. So, yes, I know Shogun is 41. Yes, he's definitely outside of his prime. And yes, he mentioned that this is his retirement fight, but he has the clearest path to victory in this fight, which is the grappling. Ihor is 18-3, but he's fought absolute trash cans on the regional scene. Ihor has poor cardio and poor takedown defense. To give him credit, he does look like he has solid striking, quick hands, good kicks, and he looks fresh in round one, but he can only sustain that for so long. Shogun has not utilized his grappling in his last two fights, but he took on Paul Craig and Ovin St. Preux. Both guys are big time submission threats and are just both really good grapplers. So Shogun has landed an average of 2 takedowns per 15 minutes at a 48% clip, which is very solid, and this is over a really large sample size. Additionally, Shogun will be fighting in his home country of Brazil. So again, you don't want to put too much stock in the narratives, but you know the crowd's going to be cheering for him. There is the potential that Ihor knocks him out most likely in round one, but if Shogun can get this fight down to the mat, then he's in his world. So I think that Shogun at some point is going to be able to get Ihor down in the mat and ground and pound him out, probably round two or round three. So prediction, Shogun by knockout. Next, we have a banger of a fight. Paul Craig taking on Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker is the favorite, sitting at minus 170. Paul Craig plus 145. So in my opinion, this is just way too volatile of a fight to confidently choose a side. I like Johnny Walker to win, but I'm definitely not going to bet him, especially at chalk. But overall, it's a pretty binary fight. Walker wants to keep it on the feet and utilize his power and length and striking, whereas Craig wants to get the fight down to the mat and work his jiu-jitsu. These guys are both kill or be kill fighters. Walker has a 95% finish rate and has been finished in 71% of his losses, where Craig has a 100% finish rate and has been finished in 80% of his losses. So I mentioned this in my video when I broke down my betting strategies. With these circumstances, the safest play that warrants a bet is just the under 1.5 rounds, in my opinion. Johnny Walker recently got a finish in round one in his previous fight, and Craig lost by unanimous decision. So you think that Johnny Walker is going to look for the finish in round one, and Craig's going to be frustrated, and he's going to go after it in round one. So the prediction here is going to be Walker by knockout round one. Next, we have Jessica Andrade taking on Lauren Murphy. Andrade is a massive favorite, currently minus 450 to minus 550. And Lauren Murphy is a big underdog, plus 360, plus 400 range. So I think that Andrade is the rightful favorite here. She's 8 years younger, even though it feels like she's been around forever. Has crazy finishing upside for the flyweight division. Has fought nothing but top tier level of competition for the past 8 years. Lauren Murphy, on the other hand, is well rounded. She's tough, but she's kind of slow and doesn't really excel anywhere, in my opinion. She could be outstruck and outgrappled, as we've seen in the past. Andrade has proven that she has great cardio. She could take it. She can keep it on the feet and beat her up, or even just take her down and outgrapple her. Andrade seemingly has a number of advantages in this fight. I just don't think that there's much value at minus 500. I was actually taking a look at the over 2.5 rounds in this fight, since Murphy's super tough. She was only finished one time in her career, and that was by Valentina, but it was all the way late in round 4. But at the end of the day, I'm going to pass because Andrade can just be super, super aggressive and just push the pace. So, and also Murphy hasn't fought too many dangerous flyweight fighters. So I'm taking the prediction is going to be Andrade via decision. Next, another solid fight. I'm surprised these guys haven't fought each other in the past because they've been around forever. But we have Gilbert Burns taking on Neil Magny. Gilbert is a sizable favorite, minus 400. Magny plus 330. I think Burns is pretty solid here. He took a loss in his last fight against Hamzat Chimaev. Obviously, everyone knows him. No shame in that. And that was one of those performances where you actually gained stock in a loss. It was a close fight. But getting back to this matchup, both these guys are very experienced UFC veterans. As usual, Magny will have the clear height and reach advantage here. Magny seems to excel against predominant strikers, though. If you take a look at his record, he was able to beat guys like Daniel Rodriguez, Jeff Neal, Robbie Lawler, and the Leech Li Jingliang. What he tends to do is kind of just wear on them against the cage and then eventually implement his own, takedowns and other styles of grappling. However, Magny, if you look at his record, he seems to struggle against strong grapplers. Most recently, Shavkat Rakhmonov, and then previous to that, Mike Chiesa. Burns is a fighter who's extremely hard to look good against, especially in the grappling realm. He doesn't have the best takedown defense, but that's because he's so confident in his BJJ. Burns has power. He has really strong offensive takedowns, and I think he's going to be able to exploit the 57% takedown defense of Magny. So Magny is not really a finisher. You got to give the finishing upside to Burns. So even though I feel like Magny is tough, he's actually been finished in 78% of his losses, the majority of them being by submission. So I'm not confident in terms of, will this fight end inside the distance or will it go to decision? But Burns is definitely the rightful favorite, and the prediction is going to be Burns via submission. Next, we have Brandon Moreno taking on Deiveson Figueiredo. The fourth fight should be a good one. I'm not sure exactly. So the third is the trilogy. I don't know how you describe a fourth one, but we have a fourth fight here between these two guys, and the line is essentially a pick 'em. My best fight odds, of course, they have everything disorganized. Brandon Moreno and Deiveson Figueiredo, all the way at the bottom of the site. It's a pick 'em, minus 110 on each side. Both these guys are so good and so evenly matched, and that's where we're getting a fourth bout between these two. So normally seeing two guys fight for a fourth time in the octagon would be kind of annoying and frustrating, but really not in this situation. I'm actually going to pick in favor of Moreno in this fight for a number of reasons. Reason number one, Figgy turned 35 at the end of last year. Moreno is 29 years old. 35 is a big deal in the flyweight division. At this stage in his career, we're unlikely to see any major improvements or, added wrinkles to Davidson's game. Whereas Moreno is at 29 years old, is basically in his prime, and we're more likely to see improvements, if any, on the Moreno side. Can't be confident in that, but that's what I feel. Reason number two is I think Figgy is dependent on big moments to win this fight. So in their third rematch, Moreno was essentially outworking him throughout the majority of the fight, whereas Figgy was able to win rounds by landing the bigger shots and knocking down Moreno. So, this can absolutely happen again in their fourth fight, but I'd rather favor the fighter who's has a more consistent and sustainable game plan, not the fighter who's dependent on big moments and knockdowns. And reason number three here for favoring Moreno kind of goes along with the second reason. I just favor the cardio and output of Moreno, especially at this stage in his career, and I think he's going to want it more. Moreno is about as durable as they come, but there is the concern of, damage accumulation. He was knocked down 3 times in their previous fight, whereas I think across all of his UFC fights, he's only been knocked down once. Obviously, Figgy has a lot of power, but still something to consider. So maybe his chin is starting to get a little bit compromised, but I doubt it. I'm going to take the Assassin Baby to win rematch number 4 and close out this rivalry. rivalry. So prediction is going to be Moreno via decision. Next up, we have the main event, Glover Teixeira taking on Jamal Hill. Very solid main event, in my opinion, should be fireworks. We have Glover is the underdog, always the underdog, this guy, and he always proves people wrong. Plus 105, and Jamal Hill is minus 125. So overall, this is a pretty binary fight. Glover is going to look to get this fight down to the mat and work his top control in jiu-jitsu. Hill will look to keep this fight standing and work his kickboxing. I'm going to favor the predominant grappler here in Glover because he's a solid wrestler with excellent top control and jiu-jitsu and submission threat, and he's going to look to exploit the 65% takedown defense of Hill. Take a look at on UFC stats. If you take a look at Hill, he was taken down 6 times in his fight with Thiago Santos, who's not much of a wrestler, and he was also taken down 6 times against Darko Stosic a couple years back. Hill has likely to improve his ground game and takedown defense since then, but it's not enough, in my opinion, to stop Glover from implementing his grappling game plan. So you obviously have to give Hill the striking advantage and the speed advantage on the feet, and maybe he does end up knocking out the 43-year-old Brazilian legend, but I don't think so. Hill has sharp hands, but he's not some crazy prolific power puncher. And Glover's durability does not get enough credit. The last time he was finished by strikes was in 2017, 5 years ago, or actually, I guess over 5 years ago now. And this was against Alexander Gustafsson, who was in his prime. And that was in the 5th round. Since then, he has not been knocked out, and he's fought take a look at his record where he's fought absolute killers. This is why I believe the over 1.5 rounds is a great look as well. If the fight ends inside of 1.5 rounds, I actually think it's going to be Glover getting the finish, probably by submission. And to top it off, again, don't like to do the narrative thing, but Glover's going to have home field advantage here as this fight takes place in Brazil, the country where he was born. So the prediction is going to be Glover via submission. All right, that does it. Great card. Really looking forward to it. Please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you like the content. And as always, good luck on your bets.